Imagine you have been chained in a cave since birth, facing a wall, unable to turn your head. Behind you, a fire burns. Between you and the fire, people pass carrying objects, and their shadows fall on the wall in front of you. Those shadows are the only reality you have ever known. You have names for them. You have expertise in predicting their movements. You have built an entire understanding of the world from watching them. And you are, by the standards of the cave, knowledgeable, competent, perhaps even wise. Now imagine someone unchains you, turns you around, forces you, painfully, against your resistance, out of the cave and into the sunlight. Plato wrote this story 2,400 years ago. He called it the Allegory of the Cave. And the question it has been asking every person who has ever encountered it is the same one it is asking you right now. What are your shadows? What have you mistaken for reality that is only ever a reflection of it? And what would it cost you, and what would it give you, to turn around? Socrates was condemned to death for corrupting the youth of Athens and impiety toward the gods. The actual crime, as Plato understood it, was something different. Socrates had spent his life doing the one thing that powerful institutions in every era find most threatening. He had asked people to examine whether what they believed was actually true. He had pointed at the shadows on the wall and asked whether anyone had bothered to look for what was casting them. They killed him for it, and Plato spent the rest of his life trying to understand why and what it meant about the relationship between human beings and truth. The Allegory of the Cave is his answer. Written in the Republic, his most important work, it is not simply a thought experiment about epistemology, about how we know what we know. It is a story about the human condition, about what most people are doing with their lives, and what becomes possible for the rare person who manages to turn around. The cave in Plato's allegory represents the ordinary state of human consciousness, the world as most people experience it, filtered through habit, assumption, social consensus, the unexamined beliefs absorbed in childhood and never seriously questioned. The shadows on the wall represent the things people take for reality, not because they are real, but because they are all that has ever been visible from the position they have always occupied. The prisoners in the cave are not stupid. They are not malicious. They are simply oriented in a direction that makes genuine reality invisible to them. And critically, they have no awareness of this. From inside the cave, the shadows aren't shadows, they are the world. The possibility that there is something else, something more, something the shadows are only a pale reflection of, that possibility does not exist for them, because nothing in their experience has ever suggested it. This is what makes the allegory so uncomfortable when you really sit with it. Plato is not describing people who are obviously confused. He is describing people who are functioning, competent, even expert, within the limits of the cave. The problem is not their intelligence, it is the direction they are facing. The philosopher, the person who has turned around and made the painful journey out of the cave, is Plato's image of what a human being can become when they commit to the pursuit of truth rather than the comfortable management of appearances. And notice what happens when they return. When the philosopher comes back into the cave having seen the sunlight, having encountered reality directly rather than through its shadows, they are not welcomed. They cannot see the shadows clearly anymore. Their eyes, adjusted to real light, struggle in the darkness of the cave. The other prisoners, who have spent their lives developing expertise in shadow reading, find the returning philosopher less competent than themselves, less useful, possibly dangerous. Plato was writing about Socrates, but he was also writing about something that happens in every era, in every context, where someone who has genuinely examined their assumptions returns to a community that has not. The power of Plato's allegory is not in its application to grand philosophical questions about the nature of reality. It is in what it reveals when you apply it to your own life. Everyone has a cave, a set of assumptions about themselves, about other people, about what is possible and what is not, about what they deserve and what they are capable of, that function exactly like the shadows on the wall. Taken for reality, because they have been present for so long that their constructed nature has become invisible. Some of these shadows were cast by childhood, by what the people around you believed about the world and communicated to you before you had any framework for evaluating it. You are not creative. You are not the smart one. People like us don't do things like that. The world is dangerous. You have to earn love. Success requires suffering. These beliefs arrived as facts. They were absorbed as facts, and they have been casting shadows on your wall ever since. Some shadows were cast by culture, by the consensus reality of the particular time and place you inhabit, the unspoken agreements about what matters, what constitutes a good life, what you should be working toward, what failure looks like, what success is supposed to feel like. These are not your beliefs exactly. They are the beliefs of the cave you were born into. But from inside the cave, they are indistinguishable from truth. The cave in this sense is not a metaphor for ignorance. It is a metaphor for the unexamined life, for the experience of living according to assumptions that have never been seriously questioned, not because questioning them is impossible, but because nothing has yet forced the question, because the chains have been comfortable enough that the possibility of turning around has never felt urgent. Plato's Socrates famously said that the unexamined life is not worth living. This is that observation stated differently. The life lived entirely inside the cave, entirely within the consensus reality of inherited beliefs and social assumptions, is a life that has never fully arrived at itself. That is operating on a map that may have very little relationship to the actual territory. The turning around, the beginning of genuine self-examination, is almost always uncomfortable. Plato is precise about this. The prisoner whose chains are removed does not immediately feel liberated. The light hurts. The familiar darkness of the cave is more comfortable than the painful brightness of reality. The first impulse, when forced to see more clearly, is often to look away, to return to the wall, to prefer the known shadows to the unknown light. This is why genuine change is difficult in a way that has nothing to do with motivation or willpower. It is difficult because it requires willingly entering a state of disorientation, of having the familiar landmarks of your inner world become unreliable while the new ones are not yet established. The gap between the old cave and the full light is a place of genuine uncertainty, and uncertainty is uncomfortable in a way that makes the cave look appealing, even to people who have already glimpsed that it is a cave. The journey out of the cave in Plato's allegory is not a single moment of enlightenment. It is a gradual and painful process of adjustment, of the eyes slowly learning to tolerate more light, of the mind slowly learning to trust what it sees when the familiar shadows are no longer available as reference points. First, the prisoner can see reflections in water, reality at one remove, still mediated, but closer to the thing itself than shadows on a wall. Then they can see the objects directly. Then, eventually, they can look at the sun, the source of all light, and therefore the source of all visibility, the thing that makes all other seeing possible. Plato called the sun the form of the good, his term for the ultimate principle underlying all of reality. You do not need to accept his metaphysics to find the structure of the journey useful. What he is describing is a progression from assumption to examination, from inherited belief to questioned belief, from the comfortable consensus to the uncomfortable but more accurate individual understanding. It is not a destination. It is a direction. The philosopher is not someone who has arrived at complete truth. They are someone who is committed to the direction of turning toward it, who has accepted the discomfort of the climb as preferable to the comfort of the wall. What does this look like practically? What does turning around actually mean in the context of a life rather than a philosophical allegory? It looks like asking the questions that feel dangerous, the ones whose answers might require you to change something you have built your identity around. Am I doing this because I actually want to, or because I was told I should want to? Do I believe this because it is true, or because everyone around me believes it? Is this the life I am actually living, or the life I am performing for an audience that may not even be watching anymore? These questions are the first painful steps toward the light. They are uncomfortable precisely because they are real, because they point at something that the shadows on the wall cannot accommodate. And they require a particular kind of courage that has nothing to do with physical bravery. The courage to find out that some of what you have taken for reality is a reflection, and to keep going anyway. Socrates was killed for asking these questions. Plato spent his life writing about why that was both inevitable and wrong. The cave always resists the person who points at its walls and names them for what they are. But here is what Plato also understood. The prisoner who has seen the sunlight cannot fully go back, cannot unknow what they have seen, cannot return to the comfortable certainty of the shadow world with the same conviction they left it with. The knowledge that there is something beyond the cave, even if imperfectly glimpsed, even if painful to look at, changes something permanently. You are watching this video in whatever circumstances you are in right now, in whatever cave, whatever set of assumptions and inherited beliefs and unexamined certainties you have been living in. The allegory does not tell you what your shadows are. That is the work only you can do. But it does tell you something important about the direction of travel, about what the discomfort of questioning means. Not that you are doing something wrong, but that you are facing the right way. Plato wrote the Allegory of the Cave 2,400 years ago. The cave has different walls now, different shadows, different chains designed for different centuries. But the light is in the same direction it has always been.